So I saw Hidden Figures over the weekend, and I am happy to report that it is an absolutely fabulous movie. And all the performances were great. The story is obviously very inspiring. But the thing is, it was a really good movie in that you can go there and be entertained. You didn't walk out feeling like you did something important. It was an entertaining thing with a good story and clearly defined characters. And obviously, they didn't get the history 100% accurate. You never expect that on based on a true story. It's they combined things from the stories of many women working in the West Computing Group at NASA during that time. And I personally think that that was a better way to go about it than sticking to, the hardcore facts of the stories of, three particular women, because it allowed more stories to be told. And it is a movie. There are elements that are fictionalized. There are scenes where I watched at the time going, that probably didn't happen quite that way. But they got the point across. And I think the biggest thing that movies like this do, just by entertaining and just being well made and not going for the jugular politically or tugging at the heartstrings every chance it got, was it breaks down stereotypes in a gentler way. The idea that women are newcomers to technical fields is one I think is very dangerous because, back in the day, before computers became widespread, the programming of them was considered clerical work. The interesting thing they don't talk about in the movie is the fact that Dorothy Vaughan got hired, and possibly some of the other women do too. She's the one I know about. She got hired because of recruitment of women, specifically African American women, during World War II. Because, there was that whole thing about World War II that all these women came into jobs because the men were off fighting, decided they liked them, and then when the men came back, they were, shoved back into the home being told, this is not natural work for you. Some people went to the point to say that it was too stressful for women to work in highly intellectual jobs. And I mean, the mathematics that these women were doing, they were doing, finite math and calculus, essentially, sine and cosine stuff, without calculators. They had adding machines, but the mental abilities, the intellectual abilities of these women are incredible. The idea that they were calculating, drag coefficients and reentry vectors by hand with just their brains, without calculators, like modern calculators, is astounding. And it really shows that the stereotypes underestimate the intellectual capacities of women. The other thing I liked, and it was somewhat subtle, but it was there, and I appreciated that it was there, are that some of the barriers on these women were in their own heads. Yes, there were societal things, that the segregated drinking fountains and the Jim Crow area, all that was very, very real. But there's this great scene where the Janelle Monáe character, Mary, I want to call her Mary Johnson, but that's the wrong person. Let's check the Google. Mary Jackson, that's right. She is talking to one of the other engineers, and she talks about, she's a black woman in America. She's never going to be an engineer. And the guy points out, he's a Polish Jew whose parents were in the camps, and look at where they are now. And this, I think, is very important, that I don't think that doing this "you can do anything you put your mind to" thing is the smart way to prepare kids for the world. I think that, making it clear from the outset, setting realistic expectations and realistic goals, and saying it's gonna be hard and people are going to be horrible to you, but it is worthwhile, is the most healthy message we can give girls. Because otherwise, this be nice to everyone and don't cause trouble and be good and be polite and wait your turn and all that stuff, it doesn't get you anywhere. Being authentic and being good at what you do gets you places. What being good and being quiet and being polite gets you is that people mostly leave you alone. People mostly ignore you. And unfortunately, we live in a paradigm, and I don't know if this has always existed or it ebbs and flows or what, but we live in a paradigm where anybody who tries to do something meaningful gets way too much crap. And we put these silly, fake things like normal or natural on people, when that just so denies individualism. Nobody asked these women if liking math was normal or natural for them. And, you can practically guarantee that yes, it was. They had an aptitude for this stuff. It doesn't matter how much training you give some people. They're never going to pick up advanced mathematics. Their brains just don't work that way. And we get so hung up on men do this, women do this, white people do this, black people do this, cisgender people do this, transgender people do this, that the individual gets lost. And the Kevin Costner character is quite interesting because he's a Kevin Costner character. I don't know how realistic the portrayals were, but like I said, it's history-ish. It makes the point that this is a guy who didn't notice the segregated coffee pot. He didn't notice the segregated bathrooms that meant she had to walk a mile to go pee, but when he found out about it, he was like, this is somebody who has value. This is stupid. Let's refine the system. And it really brings home how counterproductive the public shaming tactics are of the modern era. This idea that because somebody didn't speak up sooner, or because somebody did something bad in the past, that they can't be part of progress now. That's anti-progress. No one is perfect. And they made very certain to show that, attitudes towards black women were not just held with white men. There's a very cute romance subplot in the movie where, he's a guy from House of Cards, one of the actors on House of Cards, the guy who plays Remy, but he puts his foot in his mouth so bad, like he was trying to impress the Taraji P. Henson character, and I may pronounce her name wrong. Oh God, today's the day. But he tries so hard and messes up so bad trying to be all manly and impressive, right? And hello, little lady, and she is just not the type to do that. My only complaint about this marketing is they're not wearing glasses. And the whole big line from it is, we don't work at NASA because we wear dresses. We work at NASA because we wear glasses. And they're not wearing glasses. A movie like this is falling prey to marketing beauty myths, right? And I get it. They want the movie to have the best chance of success, and it's going very well. But these women are not less attractive because they're wearing glasses. If they wore glasses in the movie, they should be wearing glasses in the ads. One step at a time, right? I just have to point this out as I'm singing the praises of this film. It is not immune to certain, how do I put this? Everybody can talk about being good and virtuous and not stereotyping and, you know, all this stuff. It's amazing what happens when money's on the line, for better or for worse. Certain things people get intensely paranoid about. I mean, God, when I was on television, I felt like it was a huge part of my job to look as physically conforming as possible, because I felt that if I looked like myself, people wouldn't want to watch the show. And so I did all this stuff, you know, in retrospect was stupid. I wore all these stupid tanning creams because people always told me I was too pale. I was constantly hungry because I was constantly worried about my weight. I wore these clothes that cut in everywhere and heels that permanently destroyed my feet. And all this was because I didn't want to be the weak link in the chain, you know. And now I realize that there are people, probably not as many people who watch me on TV and wanted to fap, but there are people who are willing to accept me and praise me for my ideas, and a smaller group of people who praise me for my ideas and my thinking even when they disagree, because they appreciate that someone is doing it, that someone cares enough to just get out there and not wait for somebody else to do it. Do it yourself. And there's this whole thing about failure, about not succeeding, right? And that means you're stupid, and that means you shouldn't have tried in the first place. And this is a really dangerous social message. You know, we see it all the time with like, oh, the Democrats got beat so badly. Like, in a two-person race, somebody has to lose. You know, be gracious about the victory. Because if the shoe was on the other foot, they wouldn't want that being said about them, right? You know, being a sore winner is worse than being a sore loser, because it stops people with good ideas from trying. And with all this Meryl Streep, Donald Trump, all this stuff around the award show, I think it's important to remember that these are all flawed people, and they're all in public, and they're going to say goofy things from time to time, because everybody does. But at least they're getting up in the morning and attempting to do something with their lives. And as much as I don't like Donald Trump, I will give him that. You know, I may not like the way he's accomplished things, but that does not take away his accomplishment. And I can say that because I don't want people looking for reasons to dismiss me. If I legitimately screw up, that's fine. But too often, people start looking for stuff because they're so afraid of being taken by a positive narrative that they shut out the possibility that they can touch and be a part of something that isn't perfect but does make things better. And I take a lot of crap for continuing to be open to people who, you know, seem to want to talk, even if the way they want to talk is not necessarily the best way. There are certain limits I put on things. There are certain behaviors I will not tolerate and will not reward. But we don't know where the next math genius is going to come from. We don't know where the the next big invention is going to come from. And if we send messages to brilliant people before they even start that it's not worth trying, we lose that innovation. And the message, one of the big themes of Hidden Figures was each of these three women went on their own journey where they had to think outside the box and kind of, we'd call it leaning in nowadays, but it was stand up and be a person, stop sitting down, shutting up and being a woman, and being a black woman on top of everything, because acknowledged it was a double-edged sword, but it really showed the virtue of trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing until you succeed. And unfortunately, too often, I know it's to a certain extent with boys we do this, but with girls, I know with me, anytime I made a mistake, anytime I was an embarrassment, every time I fell flat on my face doing something, my parents freaked out and basically made me never want to do it again. They really added insult to injury. It was always, why did you do that? Well, what's wrong with you? What were you thinking? All that stuff. And it's like, what was I thinking? I wanted to try stuff. And we keep talking about these fierce, fearless girls. There's no such thing as a fearless human being. You can't be brave if you're fearless. And there was great bravery in this film. And it's a film that makes you want to read the book and makes you want to look up the true stories of these women. And I think that is a greater victory than making a movie that was completely historically accurate that nobody wanted to see. I mean, it's little things like Dorothy Vaughan is shown with this car and fixing it and all that stuff. And, in real life, apparently she rode the bus to work. It's little things like that historical purists are going to freak out about. But it was a metaphor for the film. It was, her character was very good with machines, therefore it made sense when she became what she eventually became. I mean, I think it's silly to claim it's a spoiler when it is someone's real life story. I think it's good to know going in that, Mary Jackson was an engineer when women weren't engineers, and black women, it was hard for them in certain states to even take the schooling to become engineers. The courses were often offered at all white schools. And I don't know that that's specifically Mary Jackson's story, but it was some women's story. So they included it. And, the stuff about the denial of promotion, that actually apparently was true with Dorothy Vaughan. She was a unofficial supervisor for many years before she actually got the official title. But that was my mother's story for years. She was doing a job that was a management job, but she was not given the credit for that role for a number of reasons. Partially, she was afraid to give up her union protections, but partially, she felt very inferior because she didn't have a college degree. And it finally took a couple of really great managers, one who was a woman. These mentors are so important but they basically pushed her and pushed her and pushed her until she did it because she deserved the extra money. She deserved the recognition, but it took her years. And, you know, we know that job security is an incredibly important thing for women for obvious reasons, especially mothers, because it's different social pressures that I just can't help but feel that women have this extra burden to be perfect that men don't have. And it's impossible to be perfect. And there's a bit more because boyhood is more rough and tumble than girlhood. And it's a lot louder and there's a lot more running around. I think there's more social training to fall down and get told off and, you know, occasionally get punched in the mouth when you really deserve it. And that prepares you for life a lot better than the stuff that girls are, you know, socialized to do. And I say this as somebody who was more of a tomboy, so I ran around and fell down. I constantly had skin knees, and yeah, a couple times I got punched in the head. I wouldn't say I deserved it. It was a much bigger guy who was picking on my sister, you know, and he slammed my head into a brick wall. Back then, that happened in schools. Nowadays, I don't know, unless it's like a freaking gun or a knife, it's a big federal case if a couple of kids fight. But, you know, I learned how to take a punch. But, you know, I also learned that way that just because people don't like you, just because people are mad at you, even if people hate you, even if people think you're inhuman, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It may just mean that they're not ready to accept the truth. And I think that Hidden Figures is an amazing movie for that way. It's an amazing movie, not just of, you know, so-called tolerance, but social progression and forgiveness and just people eventually getting ahead on merit. And I think it's so important that films like this exist just so people in this echo chamber of outrage modern era are reminded of what you know, mostly an imperfect meritocracy, but a meritocracy nonetheless looks like. And in a meritocracy, it isn't all white men. In a meritocracy, there are people who look different. And there are people of different genders. And there are people of different backgrounds, both socioeconomic and, you know, from the DNA, the racial, the geographical, you know, the religious, that kind of stuff. Meritocracies have this horrible word, diversity. I claim meritocracies don't contain people that all look alike, because you can't make a chair with only legs, right? You can't make a car with just screws. And if everybody you hire is just a nut and bolts, then you don't have any sheet metal, you don't have any pistons. People who do different things look different. And this idea that, oh, we hire the best people so they all look the same makes less sense than we hire the best people. So some of our offices may look very homogenous because this is who we had access to. But all of our offices don't look that way. And people should be able to move from one office to another without it seeming weird. And without us hearing nonsense about corporate culture and everything like that. You know what a good corporate culture is? It's a culture that accepts people for who they are and sets clear, appropriate behavior conducts that allow everybody to succeed, because you want different, because different leads to innovation. And you can't get different perspectives if everyone you hire comes from the same background and comes from the same school. And right now we have too much of this thing where this college degree idea is, instead of being used as a foot in the door for a first job, HR departments care about college degrees when someone walks in who's 50. And that's absurd. You should look at their job experience and go, this person can do the job. But instead, it's cover your ass, right? It's, oh, the checklist, the boxes say college degree required. So even though you have the most work experience and you have the most achievements, you're not the best hire because you don't have a piece of paper. You learned on the job. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. College is important. It is. I believe that there shouldn't be the financial barriers to college and university that I encountered. If you're smart and you have the good grades, you should be able to go without crushing debt. I absolutely believe that. But if somebody finds a way to get skills another way, you shouldn't stand on ceremony. And you shouldn't count someone out just because they don't look the way you expect, or they don't sound the way you expect, or they don't dress the way you expect. Because innovation doesn't come from that kind of narrow-minded thinking. And that's why I talk to different people. That's why I talk to people I disagree with. But I'm going on a bit long. Great movie. You can obviously see the thoughts it inspired. Gonna put a spoiler tag on this just in case. But I don't think talking about people's real world stuff is spoilers. But hope you enjoyed this. And really, go see the movie. And read up on these absolutely fabulous women who helped us learn about space and learn more about our world. And, you know, they're brilliant beyond imagining. And, you know, I wish there was more movies like this. I wish there was more movies that just told a good story, and we don't need, you know, as much as I like my explosions and spaceships and CGI raccoons, I don't need them in every movie. And I like that this movie did well because it shows that movies that don't have spaceships and explosions and CGI raccoons can still do well. Right? Right. Because diversity of thinking is good.